In BC, there were 18 residential schools. Some of them were run by the Catholic Church. And since the discovery of the suspected unmarked graves of students at the Kamloops Indian Residential School, there have been steps to address this history and move towards reconciliation. Joining us here in studio today is Solange Legal, who works as a consultant on Indigenous reconciliation for the Archdiocese of Vancouver. Solange, hi there. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Nice to have you here. So how did all this come about for you? How did you find yourself working for the Archdiocese of Vancouver?
It's actually an interesting story. So I was very torn as being both Métis and Catholic, those being very strong parts of my identity. When the news of Kamloops broke a few years back, that really broke me inside. And I had a hard time reconciling those two parts within myself. And so that through prayer and through thought and kind of my own time kind of spent, thinking about those parts of myself, I ended up writing a letter to the Archbishop, kind of explaining, through my prayer and my thoughts, this is what's on my mind. And after that sharing, it was just a one-page handwritten letter, he got back to me and he asked if I would be willing to serve on a Healing and Reconciliation grant committee. And so at first I said, no, I think you've got the wrong person. And I kind of shied away. It wasn't anything that I'd ever, thought for myself. And so, but then they came back and they said, no, we really think you should. And I actually came back again and said, well, here's the reasons you don't want me. And they said, no, those are the reasons we do. And I said, well, I guess I can't argue that. So I ended up saying, well, I'll try it and we'll see how it goes. And if I'm meant to be here, we'll know if I'm meant to be here or not. And it's been 2.5 years. So it is where, God was leading me. It is where I was meant to be. And through those conversations that we were having in these committee meetings, they then came and asked again, well, would you be willing to work for the Archdiocese and help put some of these other things that we've been talking about into action? And again, I took some time to kind of pray and discern on it, but now I've been doing that for just over a year.
Okay, so what kinds of projects then are you involved in or with the grant committee?
So the grant committee is actually separate from my other role. So I am doing both of those things. The grant committee is for local Indigenous-led projects that are geared towards healing and reconciliation. So we get lots of applications. Our local committee will go through them and make sure that everything that is needed for those projects to...
What kinds of projects? Just like a little more detail.
So there has been a book that's been republished that shares stories from survivors and people that went to St. Mary's Residential School in Chilliwack. There are things that are towards research. There are some projects that are cultural revitalization. There's language classes. So there's a very wide variety of different things.
Well, what's it been like for you then, if you've been invited into some of these projects, or at least finding out a little bit more about them, the impact on you to be in this space now?
I absolutely love being a witness to these projects. It's very humbling and honoring to be there with the people and on the land. One of the stories that really had an impact on me, or one of the things that always kind of really touches me deeply, is when you're on the land with the people, in the space, and especially on the old land from, say, the St. Mary's Residential School, or in Sechelt, the St. Augustine's Residential School. So being on that particular land with the people, with the First Nations people, and seeing the children, that's what kind of impacts me the most, is when you see the children in their regalia, and they're smiling, and they're with their families, and they are singing, and they're dancing, and they are just enjoying themselves. That's kind of what hits home, because that land was a space where that wasn't allowed for many, many years. So to now see that in the children and in the community and kind of coming back to life, that is actually truly a blessing.
Well, I'm glad we're having the conversation today, but as you're aware, the conversation around residential schools, that can make some people uncomfortable. So how do you approach it? Everyone
is on a different part in the journey. And so I always like to remember that, everyone is coming at it from a different perspective, a different background, and they're on a different part of that journey. There is a story, actually, that I'd like to share. So one of the visits that I had with some of the First Nations people, there was funeral and what's the word I'm looking for? There was traditional ceremonies that hadn't been done yet for children that were lost. And so I was asked to go and witness and just be with the people as they were doing their traditional ceremonies. And it was over the course of a weekend. And so I was there with the people, and on the first day, I got to know a lot of the different elders and was introduced, around and as a representative from the Archdiocese and from the church. And the first day was absolutely lovely. The second day, it started a little bit differently. I ended up getting there early, and one of the elders that I had met the previous day came and she wanted to talk to me, but she was very heated and she had a lot of anger, and she was expressing that to me. And as I was standing there listening, my initial response, in my mind was thinking fight or flight. And what do I do? How do I respond to this? And it was very heated. It was very loud. But as I was thinking that in my mind, I also knew in my heart that that wasn't going to be the right response. And so I kind of started praying and asking, well, now what do I do? And so I ended up just being present with her. I listened. And by the end of it, we ended up hugging, we ended up crying together, and then we ended up sitting together for the rest of the ceremonies of that morning. So it started in a really difficult place, but it ended very beautifully.
Just by listening.
Just by listening.
Just by listening. You have so many roles here that we could be exploring. You're a singer and a songwriter.
Yes, I am.
As well. And we do want to play one of your songs, Into the Light, now. And that came out earlier this month. So can you help to set it up for us?
That song, well, all of my music, it comes from a place of where I'm weaving the different parts of myself together. So when I talk about being Catholic, or I talk about, in my faith journey, I talk about being Métis and my family and my, journey. These things kind of come together in my music, and it always is an overflow of my prayer life, my relationship with God, but it is also a sharing of both my personal and ancestral spirituality. So I like this particular song because it does talk about kind of the darkness and then the coming into the light and the hope that we have of, even though it can be tough and difficult at times, that we can kind of come into the light and find the joy.
Solange, thank you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Solange Legal works as a consultant on Indigenous reconciliation at the Roman Catholic Archdiocese in Vancouver. Here she is now with Into the Light.
When it's dark and I fall to my knees, He is there and He beckons to me. When I'm lost and I feel so afraid, I am here now, I hear